The evening began as most do. A quiet drizzle against the window pane, soothing in its constancy, promising a night of solitude and productivity. I had stayed back home to catch up on work, while my family took a weekend trip to the countryside. The peace was almost palpable, a welcome break from the usual hustle and bustle of daily life. With a cup of hot tea in hand, I sank into my favorite armchair and began sifting through emails, the rhythmic sound of rain providing a calming backdrop. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the tranquility was abruptly shattered. A loud bang echoed through the house, jolting me from my concentration. My heart skipped a beat as I strained to determine the source of the noise. It had come from the back door. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stood and made my way towards the sound, each step heavier than the last. The house, now eerily silent except for the rain, felt like it was holding its breath. I approached the back door cautiously, peering through the small window embedded in it. Nothing seemed amiss outside, just the dark, rain-soaked backyard. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door, opening it slightly. The door creaked, and the cold night air rushed in, making me shiver. I scanned the backyard but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Perhaps it was just my imagination or the wind, I thought, trying to calm my racing heart. I closed the door and turned the lock, but the uneasy feeling persisted. It felt as though I was being watched. As I stepped away from the door, a faint, eerie whisper reached my ears. It seemed to come from the basement. My pulse quickened as I grabbed a flashlight and headed towards the basement door. The stairs creaked under my weight, the beam of light barely cutting through the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, the old wooden floorboards came into view. I hesitated, the whispering growing louder in my mind, then stepped forward. A sharp sound of glass breaking shattered the silence. I whipped around, flashlight in hand, scanning the basement for the source of the noise. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, but then I noticed a small window slightly ajar, with shards of glass scattered on the floor. Panic set in. Someone had broken into my house. I bolted up the stairs, locking the basement door behind me. I grabbed my phone to dial 911, but the call wouldn't go through. The line was dead. Frustration and fear surged as I tried to think of my next move. The old landline in the study came to mind. I rushed to it, my footsteps echoing through the empty house. Just as I reached for the phone, the doorbell rang. I froze, my hand hovering over the receiver. Who could it be at this hour? The urgency of the situation drove me to the door, and I peered through the peephole. The front porch was empty. I decided to ignore it and make the call. As I dialed the number, a loud crash came from upstairs. My blood ran cold. Someone was definitely in the house. The operator's voice finally came through, calm and collected, but I could barely articulate my situation. She assured me that the police were on their way. Moments later, the distant sound of sirens brought a glimmer of hope. But then, a chilling scream echoed from upstairs. I ran towards the stairs, my heart pounding. As I reached the top, I saw him. A dark figure stood at the end of the hallway, a menacing silhouette in the dim light. He turned slowly, revealing a sinister grin. In his hand he held a knife, its blade glinting ominously. Fear gripped me as I took a step back, and he advanced. I stumbled down the stairs, my mind racing. I had to get out. I bolted for the back door, but he was faster. He grabbed me with a grip like a vice. I fought back, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He dragged me towards the kitchen. In a desperate move, I reached for the nearest object, a frying pan, and swung it with all my might. It connected with a sickening thud, and he staggered back, dazed. I didn't waste a second. I ran out the back door, into the rain-soaked night. The sound of sirens grew louder as the police arrived. I collapsed on the wet grass, sobbing in relief. The officers found me moments later, assuring me that I was safe. They entered the house, and I could hear the struggle as they apprehended the intruder. In the aftermath, I learned that he was a wanted serial killer, known for breaking into homes and terrorizing his victims. The thought that he had chosen my home still sends shivers down my spine. That night changed me forever. I had come face to face with pure evil and survived. Weeks passed, but the fear lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and the sound of rain, once calming, now sent me into a state of high alert. Every creak, every whisper in the dark brought back memories of that night. One evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. The sky was overcast and a light drizzle began as I stepped outside. I walked through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, trying to find solace in the routine. As I walked, I noticed a car following me at a distance. My heart rate spiked, and I quickened my pace. The car sped up, keeping pace with me. Panic set in as I turned the corner, hoping to lose it. But it followed, its headlights cutting through the rain. I dashed into an alleyway, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the car's engine idling nearby. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. The car eventually drove off, but the encounter left me shaken. I decided to cut my walk short and head back home. As I turned onto my street, I saw the police cruiser parked outside my house, its lights flashing. An officer approached me as I neared the house. He explained that they had received a call about a suspicious person lurking around my property. My stomach churned. Was it him again? Had he escaped custody? The police conducted a thorough search of the area, but found no trace of anyone. They assured me that they would increase patrols in the neighborhood and advised me to stay vigilant. I thanked them and went inside, locking the door behind me. That night, sleep eluded me. Every sound, every shadow seemed menacing. I lay in bed listening to the rain, my mind racing. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. But the fear never fully left. I started attending therapy, hoping to cope with the trauma. The therapist suggested keeping a journal, so I began writing down my thoughts and feelings. It helped to an extent. One particularly stormy night, I sat at my desk, writing in my journal. The wind howled outside, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice trembling. "It's Detective Harris," came the reply. I peeked through the peephole and saw a man in a trench coat holding up a badge. Relieved, I opened the door. "Good evening, Detective. What brings you here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've been monitoring the situation, and I wanted to personally check in on you," he said, stepping inside. "Mind if I take a look around?" "Of course," I replied, stepping aside. He moved through the house with a practiced efficiency, checking every room and corner. As he finished his sweep, he turned to me with a serious expression. "We've received reports that the man who attacked you has been spotted in the area," he said, his tone grave. "We're doing everything we can to apprehend him, but I need you to be extra cautious." A chill ran down my spine. "Do you think he's coming after me again?" "It's possible," Harris admitted, "but we're keeping a close watch. If you notice anything suspicious, don't hesitate to call us." I nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and gratitude. After the detective left, I double-checked all the locks and windows, making sure everything was secure. Sleep was out of the question, so I sat in the living room, clutching the knife and listening to the storm rage outside. Hours passed, and the storm finally subsided. Exhaustion eventually overcame my fear, and I dozed off on the couch. I awoke to the sound of birds chirping, the morning sun streaming through the windows. For the next few days, I remained on high alert, but nothing unusual happened. The police maintained their patrols, and I found some comfort in their presence. I resumed my daily routines, albeit with a heightened sense of awareness. One evening, I decided to visit the local library. I needed a distraction, something to take my mind off the constant fear. The library was a place of solace for me, filled with the comforting smell of old books and the quiet rustle of pages turning. As I browsed the shelves, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I selected a few books and settled into a cozy corner to read. Hours passed, and I lost myself in the stories, momentarily forgetting my worries. When the library announced closing time, I reluctantly gathered my things and headed home. The streets were quiet, and the sky was clear, a stark contrast to the stormy nights I had grown accustomed to. I walked briskly, my thoughts on the books I had borrowed. As I approached my house, I noticed a figure standing by the front gate. My heart skipped a beat, and I slowed my pace. The figure turned towards me, and I recognized Detective Harris. "Detective, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in on you," he replied, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Thank you. I appreciate it," I said, unlocking the gate and stepping inside. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? Sure, that sounds nice, he said with a smile. We entered the house and I put on the kettle. We sat in the kitchen, sipping tea and talking about mundane things. For a moment, I felt a sense of normalcy, a brief respite from the fear that had taken over my life. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Detective Harris seemed distracted, his eyes darting to the windows every few minutes. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. Is everything all right, Detective? I asked, my voice tinged with anxiety. He hesitated before answering. We've received some new information about the man who attacked you. It appears he has an accomplice. My heart sank. An accomplice? What does that mean for me? It means we need to be extra vigilant, Harris said, his tone serious. We're doing everything we can to protect you, but you need to be cautious. Don't go anywhere alone, and keep your phone with you at all times. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The fear that had started to fade now surged back with full force. After Detective Harris left, I locked all the doors and windows, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and constant vigilance. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what could happen. I followed the detective's advice, never going anywhere alone and keeping my phone within reach. One afternoon, as I was walking to the grocery store, I noticed a man following me. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, hoping to lose him in the crowd. But he kept pace with me, his presence a constant threat. I ducked into a nearby cafe, my breath coming in short gasps. I glanced around, hoping to see a familiar face or someone who could help. I spotted a woman sitting at a table near the window, engrossed in a book. I approached her, trying to keep my voice steady. Excuse me, could I sit here for a moment? I think someone is following me. She looked up, concern etched on her face. Of course, sit down. Do you want me to call the police? I shook my head. No, I don't want to cause a scene. I'll just wait here for a few minutes and see if he leaves. We sat in silence, the minutes ticking by slowly. I kept an eye on the entrance, hoping the man would lose interest and move on. Eventually, I saw him walk past the cafe, his hood still pulled low over his face. I let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, I said to the woman, my voice trembling. I think he's gone. Are you sure you're all right? She asked, her concern evident. I think so. I'll just be careful on my way home, I replied, offering a weak smile. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. The encounter had shaken me, but I was determined not to let it control my life. I made my way home, constantly checking over my shoulder, but the man was nowhere to be seen. The days that followed were uneventful, but the fear never fully left. I continued attending therapy, finding some solace in the sessions. My therapist encouraged me to confront my fears head-on, to take back control of my life. One evening, I decided to visit a friend who lived across town. It had been a while since we had seen each other, and I was looking forward to catching up. I took a taxi to her house, not wanting to risk walking alone at night. We spent the evening reminiscing and laughing, the hours slipping by unnoticed. It felt good to be around someone familiar, someone who knew me well. As the night wore on, I realized it was getting late. I should probably head home, I said, glancing at the clock. Are you sure? You could stay the night, my friend offered. Thanks, but I think I'll be all right. I'll just call a taxi, I replied. She walked me to the door, giving me a hug. Take care and call me if you need anything. I will. Thanks for tonight, I said, stepping outside. I called for a taxi and waited on the porch, the night air cool against my skin. The streets were quiet, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. As I waited, a sense of unease washed over me. I glanced around, my eyes scanning the shadows. Then I saw it. A figure standing across the street, watching me. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone. The taxi arrived moments later and I hurried inside, grateful for the safety it offered. The ride home was tense, my eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror, watching for any signs of being followed. When I finally arrived home, I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. The fear had taken its toll, but I was determined not to let it break me. I had survived the worst, and I would continue to fight for my peace of mind. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I began to reclaim my life. I took up new hobbies, spent time with friends, and tried to focus on the positive. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. One afternoon, I received a call from Detective Harris. "We caught him," he said, his voice filled with relief. "Both of them. You're safe now." Tears filled my eyes as I thanked him. The nightmare was finally over. The men who had terrorized me were behind bars, and I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. In the weeks that followed, I worked on rebuilding my sense of security. I installed new locks, added security cameras, and even got a dog for companionship and protection. Slowly, the fear began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and resilience. I continued attending therapy, finding closure in the sessions. I wrote down my experiences, hoping to help others who might be going through similar situations. My story was one of survival, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. As time went on, I found myself smiling more, laughing more, and living life to the fullest. The scars of that night would always remain, but they no longer defined me. I had faced my fears and come out stronger on the other side. Looking back, I realized that the experience had changed me in profound ways. It had taught me the importance of resilience, the power of community, and the strength that lies within each of us. I had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, forever changed but stronger for it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload new videos.